Welcome to Journeys with the No Schedule Man, exploring authentic stories of personal growth and lessons learned from people living true to themselves with creativity, passion, and purpose. For all past episodes, subscribe on iTunes or visit noscheduleman.com. And please connect, share, and contribute with a comment, rating, or review. And now, here's your host, the No Schedule Man, Kevin Bulmer.
I've been known to struggle with reality, not that it is any real mystery.
Broadcasting from London, Ontario, Canada. Welcome. I'm Kevin Bulmer. This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man. We are here to celebrate and share the journeys of heart-centered entrepreneurs who have challenged themselves to act on their inspiration so they can expand and grow. And together we explore their triumphs, challenges, thoughts, fears, and lessons learned. And today, the story of Chantal Watier, who is the founder and owner of Space to Grow Studio. And never a better time, as we're in the middle of this coronavirus mess, than to have a discussion about the business of well-being. It's a phrase that maybe I've put to it. And I've admired Chantal for as long as I've known her. She spoke at Mo Mondays London, which is the event series that I host, and did a fabulous job. I love what she shares online. I think that you're going to find a lot of comfort and value in meeting Chantal and hearing what she has to share, regardless of the circumstances of our current time. So if you find this episode sometime even well into the future, there's never a bad time to investigate your well-being and to nurture that. And we're going to find out about how that became Chantal's business and forefront in her life in just a couple moments. Before I introduce you to Chantal, I want you to remember. Okay, I want you to remember. I would like to remind you that this podcast is available both video and audio, that you can subscribe for free wherever you listen to or watch podcasts, unless you listen on Spotify. I've just recently discovered Spotify, and I'm like, hey, my music is on there. I got to get the podcast on there. It's not on Spotify, but you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and all of the other places that have pretty logos on this slide, which you can't see if you're listening to the audio, unlike, for instance, iHeartRadio. If you're into the video, you can catch us on YouTube at No Schedule Man, and Facebook at No Schedule Man is our Facebook page. Make sure to subscribe, and we would love to have you on board for future episodes. Visit us on our website at noscheduleman.com and stay in touch via email. We'll send out our newsletter once every couple of weeks. We call it Letters from the Little Engine. I think we can. So some inspiration right into your email inbox, and we'll keep you up to date on episodes of this podcast as well. Thanks to Diamond and Gold Treasures at 4330 Colonel Talbot Road in London, offering some of the finest jewelry in the area, along with jewelry repair and custom design. Learn more at diamondsgold.com. Mo Mondays London, the inspirational event series hosted by yours truly. We'll get right back at it as soon as they give us the all clear on this COVID-19 situation. And once we do, we'll be at the London Music Club. You can connect with us and learn more at momondays.com/London. Thanks to Mulligan Realty Group for being available whenever you need them, to genuinely caring about you and the service you get. They do things differently at Mulligan Realty Group, the kind of realtor you deserve. Learn more at mulliganrealtygroup.com. Thanks to Brett and the team at Provincial Glass and Mirror, a professional full-service glass company owned and operated in southwestern Ontario, and you can find out more at provincialglass.com. Want to say hi and thank you to Carol at Trickett Financial, who provides insurance and investments for Canadians and newcomers to Canada. You can learn more and connect with Carol at trickettfinancial.com. And thanks also to the Turtle Tribe, a unique online coaching community supporting heart-centered entrepreneurs and creative souls so that they can experience more of what they desire and deserve. We say run your own race at your own pace and from your own place. You can learn more and join us today at theturtletribe.com. This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man. My name is Kevin Bulmer. It's wonderful to have you here. I'm really excited for the opportunity to introduce you to Chantal Watier. Chantal is the founder of Space to Grow, a healing and teaching lifestyle studio aimed at creating a safe space with the ideal conditions to stimulate each person's natural healing and growth. At Space to Grow, people can receive counseling, psychotherapy, and coaching services, as well as participate in multiple classes and workshops. They focus on restoring balance between the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual self while promoting the flow of vitality so each can grow their own capacity to fully engage in life. I've had the opportunity to be at Space to Grow Studio and to work with Chantal a little bit, and I can tell you it's a special place run by a special person, and she is here with us today to chat on Journeys with the No Schedule Man. Chantal, it's nice to see you. Thanks for doing this. I know that media is your thing that you like doing the most, right? So talk about comfort and capacity and letting things flow. This is a new challenge for you, but you're stepping into your discomfort, huh?
I really appreciate the opportunity, Kevin. Thank you so much. You've given me the opportunity at Mo Mondays to get outside my comfort zone and share my story, and here again today. So I'm feeling very grateful for you and this opportunity. And I'm seeing a few people that I know signing in. So thank you for whoever's going to sign in and watch today. I'm really excited to share, actually, because this story has been a lot of ups and downs, unpredictable, twists and turns that just brought me back closer to my truth and my faith. And so I just hope to inspire whoever is going through similar stuff, as we are all going through such changes at this time. I think it's ideal time to share some inspiration.
I couldn't agree more. I'm interested in the idea about being yourself. And I have found, Chantal, that that's been a real challenge for me to even really understand who that is or what that means or how many different kinds of things that it can mean. When do you first recall even kind of going on that search for yourself?
Well, luckily, I come from a family that is very spiritually inclined. My mom has always talked about that. And so I think from a very young age, I was very spiritual, always talking to God or the universe or whatever you want to call it. Wasn't necessarily brought up with, I was brought up with Catholic Christianity, but that's not what I talk about now. I'm way more spiritual about energy and spirit and source and love versus fear. But that's always been a guiding source. And I always had this deep belief that everything happens for us and not to us. Although in the moment, I didn't always successfully remember that, but it always is an anchor that pulls me back out of fear. So I do wish to promote it for others.
You've already used a lot of words that are part of my vocabulary now, that if I could go back in time and introduce the current me to my older self, he would be going, what are you talking about?
Yes.
Words like source, which are just part of my everyday thinking and talking. But another word that you mentioned, spiritual.
Yes.
I'm interested in what that represents to you, because it seems to me that that's a sort of word that many of us have certain connotations with, whatever they may be. What does it mean to you to be spiritual?
Well, I'm a deep believer that we are spirits having a human experience, and the way we have this human experience is through our physical body, our mind, our body, and our emotions. And so this is how we get the information, but ultimately the driver is the spirit, and this is just a vehicle to actually experience it. So I will continually promote the word of spirit because it is the source. Kind of like, I describe it like a lamp. If it's plugged into the source of the power, there's energy coming through it. But if it's disconnected, it might have a battery, a short-term source of it, but eventually it disconnects, it dies, kind of like our cell phone. It's like short-term, we can be disconnected from source, but that's where the fuel comes from. And the spirit needs this interconnection. And so as much as right now we are feeling like we're being isolated and disconnected, I think it's also an opportunity for us to join in spirit in a new, different way, to feel each other's connection through not just the physical way, but in a much deeper way. And I feel that life happens to us, not for us, not to us. And right now, this is an opportunity for us to go deeper than what we see and more into what we feel and this interconnection. And we have the option of going into fear or love. And it's helping me to actually really promote love, because I feel the draw into fear, into constriction, into isolation in the physical world. But once we see broader from a different, higher perspective, we're actually having an opportunity to reconnect actually on a much more authentic way, in my opinion, if that makes sense.
It does. Again, it wouldn't have made sense to the Kevin that you could have met many years ago, but it does to the one that's having the conversation with you now. And I'm really grateful to be having it. On that line, I'd like to express gratitude on behalf of Chantal and myself to Brad, to Cheryl, Michelle, Charlene, Suzanne, Megan. Is it Micheline?
That's my mom.
I hope I'm saying that correctly. Thank you all for joining us. Some of the people that you've made connections with, I suspect, just by being exactly who you are, who are interested to join you as you share today. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. And you experienced that, Chantal, at Mo Mondays. From this, I had to chase you. That sounds a little unfair. I asked you a couple of times until you felt ready to do that. I think that that's a really heroic act, to stand in front of people under the lights. There are microphones and speakers, and some of those things can be very intimidating when you're not used to it. And when you're in that environment and you're sharing something very personal to other people that you don't know, and then something like this is similar, I feel. I wonder what your experience has been like, having done Mo Mondays and opening up more and more with your online social media channels with what you share, because I think it's very valuable. And I would encourage anyone who comes across this to connect with you online, and even doing something like this, at how powerful it can be, that when we just open up and share our experience without necessarily trying to deliver takeaways or teach you should do this or you should do that, but rather to just share, here's what's been my experience, what's worked for me, what has been challenging for me, and what I've done to try to address those challenges. How powerful that can be to really create a deep connection with other people. What's that been like from where you're sitting?
Absolutely what you're saying. A good mentor of mine in the past had said that it's not, sharing your story is not about you, but who you can reach and who you can inspire. And so that's always the mindset that I get into before doing something like this, to help my fear settle. It's like, this is not about you. This is not even about your story. It's whoever might need to hear it. And sometimes we forget the impact of, the ripple effect of a little stone that you throw. And I just trust that this will reach whoever it's supposed to. And that gets me out of my head or out of my fear of it, and just allows the message to get through. So on that note, for those who don't know me, I do practice trauma therapy. And I believe that trauma is the absence of life, that life gets ripped out of your system and you go into fear protective, but we do heal in connection with others. So my goal is always to promote healing and wellness and connection. And so this is why I'm doing this, and in hopes that somebody might relate to my story, might relate to some of the struggles that I continue to experience and overcome, and just get inspired. Like just this morning, I was doing live meditation with actually Brendan, that is the photographer for Mo Mondays. He's amazing. And he said something about inspiration is about in spirit. And I truly believe that it's about us going back into spirit and to sharing that, so that others can go into spirit with themselves as well. It's just really important to share your story.
Interesting that you would bring up Brendan. His was the most recent episode prior to this on the podcast.
Is that right? I have to watch
yeah,
it.
Brent. Yeah, and it's the longest episode I think we've ever done.
Well, he's just amazing, right? So I'm not surprised that it just went on.
Well, Brendan is another example of a person who I observe and greatly value for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that I aspire to be more like them, as I do you. That came out wrong. As I aspire to be more like you as well. How's that? Thank you for giving me a lot of extra rope on that one. You mentioned another word that I'd like to invite some conversation around if you're game, and that's trauma. I'll share from my own experience that that's a word that has always felt rather loaded to me, and up until recently. And has brought to mind things that are particularly horrific. And I mean that in a context of that if you're somebody like me who's just plain old white Canadian kid who's lived in the same city his whole life, who has great parents and didn't really have anything that he can point to that was, really horrific in his experience, that you don't have really any right to be talking about or using a word like trauma. But now that I'm understanding more about how our cells have memories and how what could be the simplest things, depending on how we interpret them, can become traumatically imprinted on who we are, and how those things can be reactivated and triggered all throughout the rest of our lives unless we become aware of them and allow ourselves to acknowledge them, which then gives us the opportunity to process and let them go and heal them, which I think I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit with our conversation. But first of all, before I go any further, is anything that I'm sharing here about this, does this resonate with you at all? Or do you think I'm off in outer space with what I'm just saying?
No, 100%. For sure. It makes sense.
So what I'm getting at, Chantal, is that I feel like a lot of us are suffering repeated trauma that we're reintroducing to our experience without even knowing it, and feeling like we shouldn't maybe be using that word or thinking that way about ourselves because we maybe necessarily had anything that we think fits that certain description. But that doesn't mean that, even like, I hesitate to say the simplest of things, but the things that could be traumatic that we imprint with a certain perspective from whatever point in our lives, is it fair to say that in your experience that can continue to reintroduce itself and cause us great suffering?
Well, the reality is that the body wants to heal itself. And so it is bringing up these wounds so that we can renegotiate them. That's the language in trauma. We want to renegotiate trauma to heal it and have a different imprint, as you said, because the body has a memory. And so trauma, kind of like mental health, comes with a lot of stigma, and limiting beliefs in the past had prevented us from being able to comfortably speak about that. And there is limiting beliefs behind the word trauma, that if it's not war or a massive, car crash, that nothing happened to me. But the reality of trauma is that it's just too much information for the nervous system in that moment. And that is the definition of trauma. So depending on your capacity, your level of tolerance to be present in the here and now, to be in connection, if there's too much stimulation in your environment and your body needs to use its survival response of fight, flight, or freeze to get through that moment, that is considered traumatic, even though you might have no sign of a traumatic event around you, but there's just too much for a child to take in, for example. So that actually leaves a traumatic imprint in the nervous system that creates a new memory. So any similar situation brings that same reaction. The most helpful thing I think I do in the work that I do is the very first session is about helping others understand that a lot of these patterns that we have are above and beyond our thinking, our conscious mind, and it's the nervous system that's actually trying to survive and protect us. And once we understand that it's not you doing something wrong, it's your nervous system, your car has the protective mechanism that take over your conscious mind, and it's not you, that helps remove the shame and the judgment, and then that opens a door for healing. Trauma is a big word that just means overflood. There was too much in my cup, it overflooded, it became traumatic. That's all it is, really.
I'm pausing because I'm trying to choose between going back into the story in a more linear journey of space to grow, or investigating where we are right now as we're having this discussion. I hesitate to dive too much into things that are somewhat time sensitive.
Yes. Well, trauma led me to Space to Grow. There's the backstory that led me to wanting to open a studio that is a shared healing space. Healing trauma doesn't mean that you have to come sit with me and talk about your trauma. Healing trauma is about bringing the counter vortex. There's the healing vortex and the trauma vortex. So it's like the flow of life, but when there is trauma that interrupts the flow of life and it pulls you out of life. And so healing that does not have to relive the actual trauma. It's about creating a safe space in the here and now for your system to have a new playful experience that actually creates a counter healing vortex, so you can actually go back into the flow of life. So my intention behind Space to Grow was to not only invite people in my space to speak about their trauma, but to actually create a whole other aspect of healing where people come together to create different experiences so we can actually heal in connection with each other, but also with different modalities. With yoga, there's belly dancing, with different workshops, with kids activities. That was the intention behind Space to Grow, is for us to come together and to reconnect with spirit, with our roots, and together promote healing and play and learning. And that's how it got created, really.
What I was thinking about was how the time that we're in now with we're in the midst, I was going to say middle, we don't know if we're anywhere close to the middle, but in the midst of a shutdown through the coronavirus situation and whatnot, is that we are in the midst of a traumatic event for many. But I don't know that I want to dive too much into that because we could be the whole rest of the conversation just exploring what ifs about that. But that was what was on my mind, is that I feel like a lot of us, myself included, are really finding that our thoughts and feelings are kind of hard to stay in touch with moment to moment when we're in a situation where what we thought was real and true has suddenly been thrown into question. But really, the idea of what's true or what's not, or control, it's all an illusion to some extent anyway, isn't it? Which brings us back into all of the things that you were just mentioning that are, I think, in my experience, healthy to explore anyway, to be healthy and whole and free and flowing in the now.
Right. And that is a very complex thing, to tell you the truth. The more I understand about the system and how it operates, the more lost I feel sometimes, because it all depends on the circumstances, and we cannot always assume that what we're experiencing is ours. Because we are spirit, because we are able to tap in to different energies, we can easily get sucked into someone else's energy or the collective energy. So sometimes we're like, I'm so scared, I'm panicking, but it might not be you. This is a collective energy that we are surrounded by. So this is so important to intentionally ground ourselves, intentionally choose what you're going to feed your system off, and what kind of energy do you want to cultivate within your system. Otherwise, our system is our tool, but if we are not navigating it, our servant, that the body, can become our masters, and we lost ourselves within the collective energies around us. And to even go deeper than that, without going too deep into it, I do believe that we have inner child, I would say inner children. We have this internal family system within ourselves that show up in different ways. I use these cards a lot in my work. This is from Inside Out, the movie, but we do have different feelings that show up at different times, which are part of our ego, and they need to be loved and accepted at all times. And so right now, there might be a lot of fears and judgment of the fear, and I shouldn't be feeling like this. But ultimately, it's about saying, of course, you have the right to be feeling like this. And you can also bring your attention to other things that are simultaneously happening within the system. It's not just fear or love. There might be layers of it, and you kind of want to acknowledge all of it and choose selectively, intentionally, what you want to cultivate.
Let's go back into the story and explore how Space to Grow came to be. You mentioned that there was a trauma that precipitated the creation of it. But I wonder if we can go back even more prior to that. You shared a little bit about how you were growing up and your interests in what I'll call loosely as spirituality and things like that. What do you remember being interested in? Like when you were going through maybe high school and if you went to post-secondary, what were some of the things that were on your mind that you thought were up ahead of you at that time or that you wanted to do?
Funny enough, I wanted to be a vet, but that didn't happen.
A vet? A veterinarian?
Yeah, I just really like animals, but that was short-lived. To tell you the truth, I think I was always a little bit ahead of my time, always kind of in my mind, overthinking about the greater good, wanting to help people, wanted to be liked a little too much by others. And even in my high school book, they called me Mother Teresa, and it was one of those things that at a very young age, they would call me a wise soul, or, always kind of mature. And yeah, I was one of those things that I don't feel like I've always fit in, because I was always above and beyond the average teenage conversation. But now I realize that it was definitely part of my journey, and it allowed me to cultivate these gifts that I now share, and that I have known how to target them and actually create work out of it, where it wasn't always the case. It used to kind of feel like my gift was a curse because it wasn't always used at the right time in the right situation. But now I try to keep my gift in sessions for people that actually come for it. If that makes sense.
So you love the cocktail party conversation like me, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not really good with like everyday conversation. I've always been very deep.
So at what point did it click into you that was going to be a, for want of a better way to put it, a career path?
Well, this is the story I shared at Mo Mondays, and I'll say it really, really short now, but a series of events, my own traumatic series of events. When I was 18, lost a friend from school that took his life. And then a couple weeks later, my grandmother died of an open heart surgery. And then a couple of weeks later, my cousin, which was near and dear to my heart, like a sister, actually also took her life. And that brought my body into shock. I could literally barely walk or stand. And I was 18 and healthy, so I couldn't wrap my head around what had happened to me. But I knew from that moment on that emotions had a direct link with your body. And so some time passed, and it kind of healed as I started to accept it. And then I did 12 years of flight attendant, which led me to fly around the world. But I always had that curiosity about what happened to my body at that point. And even on the plane, people would be like, you're in the wrong line of work. You need a better, office to do this work. So I always knew I had this visual of sitting in an office and using my skills of communication and knowledge of my own experience to help others. It was just like one of those things. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get there, and I don't really believe that I can do it because I'm just this little flight attendant, and who am I to do this? But it wasn't going away, the desire, the vision. And so I just kind of followed the steps as they eventually unfolded and led me to this beautiful office that I love working in.
I'm imagining you speaking with guests on the airline. And I'm thinking back about when I was in my late teens and served tables at Red Lobster of all places. And I was a terrible waiter. And one of the reasons is I think I was interviewing the guests. I'd like to stay and talk. I wanted, like what we're doing here, I wanted to know more about them, and I wanted to have conversation. And that wasn't really what I was there for. Well, it was, but that's why I wasn't good at what I was being paid to do. But you can't help who you are, I guess. And so I'm envisioning your intuitive sense just of who you are of others, your sensing of other people's energy, your high level of empathy and compassion. Did it ever get to where it was almost uncomfortable when you were in that line of work because you could only do so much about it?
Yes and no. I mean, I tend to always try to be in the present moment and realize that life is always guiding you. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. That's something that was bred into me, even though, you know, you tend to forget sometimes. But it started to get more uncomfortable at the end when it was time for me to make the changes. And I do believe that that's just the way of life bringing you on your path, you know, the path that you're on. If it's no longer for you, it will become increasingly uncomfortable until you get to see the signs and walk onto your other path. So only towards the end where there was like, I'm not liking this job as much anymore. I don't think this is for me. And the signs were just kind of coming. It started by receiving something in the mail about, you know, addiction course at this college, and I kept on thinking about it. So those are the signs, you know, you get a sign and then it's repetitive in your mind. It's like, maybe I should look into that. And then I moved from Toronto to London. And so I also didn't want to commute, and I had a 1-year-old baby. So I was like, I'm not going to be a flight attendant forever. What's next? What's next? And just this reoccurring thought, and I connected with this college, and then I met the instructor, and it just felt right. So I just, like, literally within 2 weeks, I signed up without overthinking of like, what does this mean? I'm a mom and I'm a flight attendant. Now I'm going to school. I didn't overthink about the process. I just went through the guides that were telling me, you know, this is calling you, check into it. And it just boom, 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 just felt right. And so the discomfort of my previous life was becoming, you know, more comfortable in this new path.
What was the point where the momentum of the, what I'll call the new path, had picked up to the point where you knew you had to fully step away from the other one? I mean, maybe I should even ask, when you moved from Toronto to London, were you still doing the flight attendant work?
Yes. The whole time that I was at school, actually, I was still commuting to Toronto. And
Wow.
so, you know, as I say, love and fear, when you make a decision, fear will come and try to to convince you that this is not a safe option. So what happened for me is through a meditation one time, I just had a clear vision of me being in an office and me doing this. And I was like, yeah, this feels so right. This is like, I saw it. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like it became foggy and the fear knocked me out. But there was this sense of like, I know I saw that vision and I'm just going to hold a vision and trust the process. And so I finally graduated from the college, and I started my my placement, and that's when it felt right to leave Air Canada. Even though I swear the actual sending the resignation letter, like I faxed it, and it was like forcing. It's like, no, you're gonna do it, and it's like send, and it was like ah, but it was so scary. But there was this sense of like, no, you saw the vision, just trust the vision, just trust, trust, trust. Life never fails you. It always supports you. And you just believe that, even though the fear is like, no, if that makes sense.
It does. It's, I find myself dialoguing about things like that fairly often. I've described it as being sort of like an out-of-body experience, but that's not really a great description. But what I've found is, well, we connected through my role as hosting Mo Mondays London. That's not something that I ever thought that I would be doing. And when I investigated it, my curiosity led me to investigate it. I knew fundamentally, energetically, spiritually, that universal tap was turned on, but I still tried to talk myself out of it.
Yeah.
And as I was going through the different stages of it, there's this voice just screaming, what the hell do you think you're doing? And I'm sure we could both share many instances like that through the course of our lives. And yet there's almost this, you know, walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. That's overly dramatic, but sense of connected sense of purpose, that you're just driven forward and being pulled on a string that's greater than you. Is that how it felt like for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just one of those things that's like, I cannot not do this.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot not do this for some reason. And now, years later, I have a greater understanding of that fear. And it's not us. That the fear is not us. We are spirit. And my spirit, my soul, my mission was calling And I heard it and I saw it. And then the fear, which is part of our ego, which is trying to protect us from the unknown and, lack of safety, is trying to convince you really, really, really hard that this is unsafe. So kind of like in the movie, and fear comes in and it tells all worst case scenario of how this new trajectory can go really, really bad. And at that point, I wasn't separated from my fear. The fear was me. I was merging with it. But now with practice, I'm able to actually take a step back and notice the fear is actually just trying to help me. And I need to parent it and actually communicate and create safety for the fear to trust me, trust the spirit, and come back down. So instead of saying, you're right, like I can't do this, and then becoming the fear, it's like, of course this is scary. Of course this is unknown, sweetie. And you don't have to be so scared. We're never alone. Life is always supporting us and bringing it back to safety. Kind of like if you're the parent and you're driving in a car filled with your kids and they're like, you don't know where you're going, you're going to crash, blah, 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 blah. You have to like stop the car for a minute and just bring peace back into the car. And it's like, guys, maybe you need to have a nap right now and trust me, because I got the GPS, which is the spirit guides, and we're okay. And even if we get lost, we're all together and we're going to find our way, because, that's what we do. And so it's about bringing safety back into the system, whether it's anger, fear, rejection, whatever wound, whatever part shows up, it's just about bringing safety back, because trauma is that. It's a lack of safety. So if you start beating those parts up and saying, shut up, you don't know what you're saying, we're actually creating more agitation in the system, which is not helpful. But that's a learned process. But kindness, speak kindly to ourselves, goes such a long way. Practicing love and acceptance just makes those parts go, okay, I'll take a step back and I'll trust you. It's kind of like a system, and you can literally give it instructions. I'm like, thank you for your notification that this is new, this might be scary, and, snooze that alarm. You can settle and trust me, and you can give it clear instruction. It's like, if I'm about to literally die, then yes, please activate and come knock. But under these conditions, you don't have to do this job, if that makes sense.
It does. Well, when the fight or flight response gets stuck open, very rarely are we actually being chased by saber-toothed tigers.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean that we can't contend with that same sort of feeling on a moment-to-moment basis. I love what you shared about the idea of parenting fear. I've never heard it put quite that way before. I wrote that down to make sure to go back and consider it. So there must have been some fear, if we can go back a few minutes again from what you described, where you were getting ready to press send on, and did I hear you correctly, the fax? So we're going back a little way. It was a fax, right? Yeah. You have to stop and explain.
Actually, but yeah, it was still a fax.
That takes me back. And then I'm thinking about the time where having a fax machine was like space age. I remember my mom was a school teacher bringing home the copies, the foolscap with like the ink that I've got that smell in my nose. Now, anyway, I digress. Previous to fax. So you're like, no, I can't send. I'm going to send. Well, I got to send. And you parented the fear, and you were just being driven forward. What were some of the things that you recall having to contend with next after that step had been taken?
Well, again, there's always more than one thing happening at once. And there is a sense of excitement that, oh my God, this is happening. I got this new job, this new placement. I'm finally going to be in the field that I get to actually practice and get paid to practice what I want. But there's also fear, because first of all, that job was was it in jail detention center for youth, and not necessarily where I intended to stay long term, but I trusted that this was in the field, this was exciting, and there was fear. So it's not but, it's both were existing, and I got to kind of maneuver through. It's like, oh my God, what have I done? And it's going to be okay. Trust the process. It's going to lead you to this new direction. But I was exposed to a lot of doubt. People around me didn't necessarily understand, because I was leaving a higher paying job that people viewed as like, you know, you get to travel, you get all these benefits and these flight benefits, and what are you doing? You can't quit to go for a $16 job at a jail detention center. What are you doing? So I had to like maneuver that, people's fear, and just trust that it's like, it feels right. There's something that's telling me it's okay. It's okay. I'm on the right track. I can't describe it. It's just internal knowing that's just like, there's a sense of safety here. I think I'm on the right track. I'm okay. It feels good.
At what point did what has become Space to Grow start to enter the equation?
Space to Grow was a surprise to myself. I think it was very divinely guided, and I had no idea what I was creating. And I think that was part of spirit kind of keeping the blindfolds on me. Otherwise, fear would have panicked for the steps and how everything happened. It was bigger than me. And I was practicing since 2015, practicing trauma therapy with Patricia Berenson and Associates through the Trauma Healing Center of London. And I had come to a realization that I wanted more office time. That was a shared office. And so my husband at the time and I decided to invest in this building to create an office space and have a rental business. So the front would have been rented to another business. And I fell in love with the large space, which I call the Flow Studio. And I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just knew I didn't want to just rent it to a stranger. I was dancing in it, and I was really called, and I could visualize myself doing workshops in there. And I was just like, what am I going to do? How can I make this space work when technically my work was just in an office, which I had here, but I really wanted that space as well. And that's how Space to Grow started. It was like, what can I do? What can I do with this room? And it's like, oh, a shared space. Yeah, expand on the healing and create opportunities for people to come and connect with each other. And this is how the word even Space to Grow came about, because I was really into this beautiful logo. I kept on being attracted to a tree and the roots and reconnecting with our roots. And what we do in therapy is we hold space. We create space for people to show up in whatever way we do. So it's like, what is this space? What am I'm creating a space, and what is the intention is for people to feel safe to heal and grow. And so that's how the name came about. It's a space to grow. And it just like piece by piece kind of created itself, Space to Grow. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to create a space to grow, a space for people to come together and heal and, you know, teach and live. And that's how healing, teaching, living came about, because that was the intention. I was just like, okay, I'm going to heal here, but I'm also going to create teachings, and I'm going to also, you know, promote life back into the system. That's when the word living. But the funny thing is, you might not get what you want, but you always get what you need, because fast forward 2 years later, this is nothing like I had in mind initially. It's better, it's more beautiful, but it's also not the Space to Grow collaborative lifestyle studio that I had in mind. I was trying to be the tree before I was the seed. So I was just cultivating the land, the space to grow, and I was trying to get the tree. I was trying to get a whole collaborative of people to sign up as members, and I was seeing way bigger than what life was at. Life was like, no, Chantal, you're just here. Stop trying to be there. And so these are the twists and turns that actually challenge you and come back to the here and now. But I had to get a few dents and a few hit in the face reality checks of, wow, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not a business person. I'm a therapist, and I've created this business that I don't know how to run, and that the building itself wasn't even ready for it. And then there's been a lot of twists and turns with the renovations and separation with my partner, my family, and then needing a place to live. So then I started to live here upstairs, and then we hired a roofing company, and that fell apart because they left it open during 2 days of massive rain. And then my beautiful apartment that I had just moved in upstairs got completely gutted. And everything was like, okay, is this a joke? But now the dots all connected. And that was supposed to happen because that apartment upstairs, once it got gutted, I needed a place to stay. And then I finished the basement, created a temporary living quarters. Now I end up living there. And so all to say that this beautiful vision of a space to grow was ultimately a space for me and my family to grow. Was all about bringing me away from this big vision and bringing it back to where I was at. I was like, I'm just a seed. And ironically enough, I was planted in the basement of this building unintentionally, unplanned, and stuck in my fears and doubt of like, wow, this whole vision fell apart. It wasn't what I tried to create. And all of these judgment and shame and fears and doubts came creeping up. And I was literally hibernating in my little basement for months and realizing now that that was me rooting like myself in this space to grow that I have created. And now I feel like I'm just coming out of the surface onto this main floor and feeling more ready and realizing how it was all blessing in disguise that allowed me to get back to what I needed to focus on, not creating this thing to save the world, this grandiose vision, but just to come back to me and my family and rooting myself. And there's more to the story, but it's so ironic how all of these bumps and these what we could have called failures were actually guiding me to get to know myself better, to reconnect with my truth and what was more important, and creating a space for me to grow, for me to heal, for me to teach, and for me to actually live, like literally live here, which was not really the plan to begin with. So want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Well, case in point, the time that we're recording this conversation.
Yes, that was a long story. It was a long story.
No, I think the name of the podcast is Journeys with the No Schedule Man.
Right.
People often ask me, what does that mean? What does No Schedule Man mean? I would say, take what Chantal just said, rewind about 5 minutes and listen to that, and there you go. But that was said far more eloquently than anything I could ever think of. That was just a masterclass, Chantal.
Thank you.
Well, that's thank you. That's the kind of sharing and the kind of insight that I think can only come from living through it, and the willingness to be. Here's a word that I'm not the biggest fan of, but the willingness to be vulnerable. And the reason why I'm not a huge fan of it is because people often tell me, "Oh, Kevin, you're so vulnerable with what you share on stage and in your podcast, and about things that haven't gone well and whatnot," and act as if that's something that is a huge act of courage. And I guess for a lot of us it is, except that when I am speaking something that other people say to me is vulnerable, the reality is I'm just sharing the truth about how I feel. And I don't feel like that should take a heroic amount of courage. I think that should be just like breathing. We should be able to share the truth about how we feel. But I guess if we were all like that, there wouldn't be a whole lot of people coming through Space to Grow asking for the help of somebody like you. Exactly. I'm fascinated by a lot of what you said, but in particular, I've never heard it put quite the way that you did about wanting to be the tree, not having yet been the seed. I'm paraphrasing now. Do you mind if we explore that a little bit more? Because there's almost a quality, or quality is not the word I'm reaching for, Chantal, an aspect of some of us who are almost programmed for instant gratification and or entitlement, or to judge ourselves and cause ourselves trauma to think that we should be able to get here all in one step, and that we compare against others, or we compete, as opposed to really honoring our journey and allowing, if you want to say, the law of the farm, or however, it's just the natural process of things to be to honor that and to enjoy that and to be aware of that, to notice it. You had mentioned also about thank you for the notification. I'm finding that it turns into a real joy when you become aware of your own growth, which you can't do if you think you should be the bud at the end of the farthest branch if you haven't set the seed down. Is this at all synonymous with what you were getting at in your analogy of wanting to be the tree but not yet having been the seed?
Yes. Well, I think the ego wants to be successful. The ego wants to have the pride of, look what I've created. And also be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it all. And I've always been the type to pray for healing, guidance, for truth. And when you ask for something, the universe offers the opportunity. And so I asked to get rid of anything that wasn't serving me, anything that was getting in my way of doing God's work, as I could say it, like to deliver the message without my shame or fear or judgment. So that being said, I had to be placed in a lot of situation to trigger those parts so that I can actually heal them and get through them. And so I had to crave those instant gratifications in order to experience the reality of what life is. It's not instant. It's not easy. It is a series of little steps and a lot of unexpected, adversity and difficulties. And the reality needs to hit you for you to become true. it just is what it is. Like children, even my kids will say, well, that's easy. And then they try and it's like, oh. And so sometimes you get hit with the reality that things are not easy, and they do come with a lot of challenges. And that's what it was. I thought, this is divinely guided. It's going to be easy. It's just like, I'm going to still be able to be a therapist, and I'm just going to rent space to other people. And I wasn't thinking of having to actually run the business behind it. I thought it was going to be easy. And then the reality hit me, and it's like, well, this is not as easy as I thought. And it's a lot more complex, all of it. And so that made me have to face those truths, those fears, and then with the idea of wanting to heal them and come back to me, that was a process of ripping off the layers and just becoming truer to the reality of what is today. It's not perfect, it's not easy, but it's beautiful and it's continuous. But yeah, we do have to become the seed before we actually, like, Rome wasn't built in a day. There's already these expressions that exist way before this.
You've talked about the business of it all, and from kind of an entrepreneurial standpoint, what have been some of the things that you've found challenging to move through and to tackle, just as far as running a business is concerned?
Well, business is not my passion like therapy is. So I didn't have the hunger for it in the same way. And without mentioning that I was going through a separation of my family, which was the hardest thing I've ever had to live, way harder than running a business. And there was also unexpected renovations that took place on 3 floors of this building that had a massive transformation. So within 2 years, I moved 5 times. I tried to launch a business while continuing the work that I do with supporting individuals in crisis or in therapy, plus trying to learn how to be a single person and do all these things that my partner used to do, and trying to manage my children's emotions and stuff. So the business was more of a side thing. This is why Space to Grow took a sideline, because it was like, that's clearly not my priority right now. I'm not here to save the world with this space to grow. I need to create a space for me to grow and heal, and my children. And so I didn't really go deeper into the business part. I kind of let it go. It was difficult, but I put it on the side. It's not done. I still host events here, and I still have therapy, but it's not nearly the tree that I was intentionally creating from the beginning. I had the vision of a heartbeat here happening, and it doesn't say that it's not going to grow into that later, but right now, it's just occupied. This business is occupied by myself, by the Trauma Healing Center of London, and my family. So kind of on hold.
I've got an entire forest of trees up here. And it's, I find a constant, battle's not the word that I'm looking for. Awareness, I guess, of being fueled by that vision and being grateful for it and excited about it, without allowing it to limit me or allowing myself to judge myself for not having realized more of it. Yeah, I would encourage anyone who comes across this episode to go back and listen to what you shared earlier of all of the different steps. As you've said, that, you might not get what you want, but you get what you need. I, like you, have been through the loss of a marriage, and I know what that's like when you, I used to laugh at people that could never, remember their own postal code. I don't anymore. I'm amazed that I actually remember them all with all the bouncing around. But then we get back to the connection part of it, I think, don't we, Chantal? Is that one of the things I realized about myself is that anytime I ever had a problem, I was there. And once I stopped running from that, I realized that I had a tendency to jump out of the frying pan and then into the next frying pan. And then I figured that once I found the right frying pan, then I'd stop cooking. Whereas you sound to me as if you had a much higher level of what I'll call loosely emotional intelligence, from a very young age. Whereas I was really kind of a walking doofus that just was well-meaning, was trying to do the right things, but needed life to really fall apart in order to be prompted to take an entirely different look at it. Like, what's going on here? I've been trying to do the right things, and none of it's really worked, or maybe all of it's worked, but that's because it's led me here anyway. But we learn through the contrast. When we see what we don't want, then automatically it draws more into clarity what we do want. And, yes. And as long as we're growing, back to that name, Space to Grow, we're going to face more contrast and discomfort, because we're growing into new levels of ourself, which means we're going to experience things that we hadn't come across before. So it's an ongoing, never ending cycle, isn't it?
It is an ongoing until you die, which is part of life. I do not want to mislead you in saying that I've always been spiritual and I haven't had those struggles, because I am very, very much able to get lost in the overthinking and the fear and the desire for the tree and the next thing. Absolutely. In fact, I had a series of events that happened in the last year that really shook me and brought me back to me, that I was like, okay, surrender. What is the message here? And it started with my cell phone and my wallet getting stolen out of my purse one morning here, actually. And it's really funny, because your intuition tells you that morning I came up to get ready for work. And I remember hearing a voice saying, don't leave your purse on the ground. Somebody might come into the studio and steal it. And I was like, nah. And so anyways, I didn't leave it on the ground there. I left it on the ground across from this other door. And I went to see upstairs who was doing renovations. And one of the guys that was doing renovations came out to put some trash out and left the door open. And within that 5 or 10 minutes, somebody walked by and saw my bag there and took my cell phone and wallet. And I didn't notice that until later. And that was kind of a shock of like, these are things that we identify with externally. This is what, you you identify yourself, my identity in my wallet, my phone. We put so much value into it. And those things were taken away. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, life is not, giving me enough lessons. I had to lose this. And this was just the beginning of a bunch of stuff within 2 weeks that I lost to really bring me back to me. And it's like, I was clearly too attached to external factors and identity that life had to take them from me so that I can find stability without identifying with those things. But a week later, my car got stolen. I was like, what? And then my front tooth broke while I was eating a bite of poutine on Canada Day. And it was like, okay. And my ceiling collapsed in the bathroom back here in the middle of a session. There was a water drip from the renos upstairs, and then the Electrical Safety Authority Board came knocking and say, we want to see what you're doing, and we have to change the wires for this whole building. And it was like, and then the final straw was this cabinet in the basement that was just hanging on the wall in the middle of dinner randomly fell off, and it was filled with paint and neon lights, and it was just like filled with glass and paint on the floor. And I was like, okay, what's the message here? And it was like, the load is too heavy. The load is too heavy. And I needed to let go of external identity, external safety, and come back to, okay, what's really important? I have my kids, I have my health. That's all that matters. You can take whatever else externally. What matters is what's left. And so, unfortunately, I had to go through those series of lessons to learn that. But it became clear to me that that's what the lesson was. It wasn't like, poor me, why is this happening? It's like, what is this teaching me? What is this teaching me? And it's like, okay, I need to not be dependent on these external things and just come back to what's truly important and let go of the overload that you carry, which was, I was really attached to creating this space to grow, this vision. And I was like, life is telling me this is not what you need to focus on right now. Like, let go of what's too much and just focus on what's really necessary. Is you, your children, my garden. My space to grow is my garden. I wasn't supposed to be planting everybody in this field and trying to save the world. It was like, just cultivate your garden, just you. And I needed to have those things happen for me to learn it.
Wow, you just gave me shivers. It would have been, do you remember when I visited you prior to Mo Mondays? It would have been not all that long after all of those calamities, because I think it was August last year. It was summer anyway.
Yes.
Anyway, it was around that time that I went out to Saskatchewan for a speaking engagement, and I met a guy there who has a business called Breathe Cycle and Yoga Studio. And you'd love him. He's I gave a talk about marketing, and he came up to me, and we've called each other brothers ever since, because it's just kind of that level of connection. And he calls the studio where they do yoga and whatnot, they call it the garden.
Amazing.
And all of their promotional material and whatever else, that's the name of that room is it's the garden. So interesting. You just gave me some shivers as far as all that's concerned. Where are you now? Like, at the time that we're having this discussion, how can people, if at all, reach out to you and work with you? Because we're all, at the time of this conversation, not able to be together other than in forums like this. Thank goodness for the internet. But assuming then that people find this down the road and whatnot, what are some of the ways that people might be able to work with you? And yeah, what do things look like for you now, Chantal?
Well, I feel like I'm in the spring where the growth is happening. There's hope and there's new growth. And I feel like this growth is more reflective of my truth. And so I feel more grounded and more rooted. And I am still offering sessions online, and hopefully I will be able to greet people in my space again. But right now I'm focusing on the work that I feel I was meant to do, and is provide therapy. And so they can reach me through spacetogrowstudio.com. They can reach me through my social media or through the Trauma Healing Center. So there's hopefully we'll be able to post my contacts, but I am definitely available to continue to support people through their journey. That is definitely what fuels me, what I'm passionate about, and that feels right. And I continue to do that, and I continue to do my own work because that's what allows me to really show up for people without all the baggage, with less baggage. Not to say without all of it, because I'm still human and I'm still on my journey and I still have my stuff to continue to sort through. But I am passionate about doing the work on myself, which allows me to better show up and guide people. And I would love to connect with whoever feels resonance to what I say.
I think there are going to be a lot of people, and we're coming through a really interesting time. Not that there's ever a bad time to connect with yourself and to really open up and meet that with love and compassion. But a lot of us are really searching.
Absolutely.
right now. I know certainly that I am. It's a joy, Chantal, to connect with people like you, and to you in particular. This podcast is one of the things that I started to do a few years ago with no clear idea of who I was doing it for, other than myself, or what it was or why, other than I just wanted to do it. I was sick of listening to myself, give myself a list of reasons why I couldn't or shouldn't. So I just bloody well started. And the gifts that it has continued to give me are considerable. And I feel like it has led me to speaking, which led me to Mo Mondays, which has led me to connect with all kinds of wonderful people like yourself, which has helped me learn and helped me grow, and given me an opportunity to hopefully reach out to other people and share the stories and the expertise and the lives of people like you with others. And hopefully I'm doing my part to try to connect more people with themselves and each other as well. But I really feel grateful. I've been curious about this conversation for a while. I wasn't sure how enthusiastic you were going to be about doing a live video broadcast, but that's been a little bit over an hour, and it goes by quick, doesn't it?
Right? Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Well, I'm excited. But Kevin, I do want to say, absolutely, you are a leader in this field, and I always love what you say. I read your posts as well, and they're very inspiring, and you make me laugh, and you're very entertaining to see on stage, and I feel blessed that you're on my path. And I also want to take a minute closing this to share thanks to all of the people that have been on my journey through Space to Grow. There's no way that I could have come this far without the support. I mean, so many people I don't even want to start mentioning because I know I'm going to forget people, but the beautiful souls that have contributed in offering their business here, or events, or I mean, my good friend Michael, which met with me weekly with providing me clarity. Michael Doyle, I would recommend him as well to help you guys find clarity. He's awesome. And all my good friends or people that have worked closely with me to create the website, to create the idea, the people that actually helped me, my partner at the time that did renovation. I mean, everyone. I don't want to leave people out, because I wouldn't have been able to do any of this, not only without spirit, but without the beautiful collective that show up. And that I truly believe that when the student is ready, the teacher appear, but also when you need a hand, life offers that person that just shows up. So you need to be able to be open to receiving the help, because there's no way I did this to in my own. I don't want to take any of this by my credit, because it was family, my beautiful parents, my family, they always show up whenever I'm in need. I mean, my children. Life surrounds us at all times with what we need. And I really want to help people look around, because we are so not alone. And we think we are. We might be scared, but we are not alone. And we are beautiful people, always trying to serve and help. And so it's about us learning how to open up and receive. And the cycle continues, right? What goes around comes around, and give and you shall receive. But people are there. We're not alone. And thank you for you and the work you do. And everyone that is listening, we all have a gift. We have a purpose. In fact, I want to also say, thank you to Jerry Visca that allowed me to write my story in a chapter of this book, I Know Why, which is another beautiful soul on this planet promoting people to get into their deeper why and connecting with their truth. And I believe that we have a purpose. And Y stands for how the world is helped by you. So I encourage everybody to look within themselves during this dark times and not see it as a dark time, but as an opportunity to see, okay, I'm out of the rat race and the work that I might have not even been passionate about. What is this teaching me about myself? Who am I and why am I here? And how can I serve the world? How can I go into love and light versus getting sucked into fear? And so this is definitely the message I want to close with. We're not alone. We all have guides internally. We all have passion. Let your voice be heard. Let your hands do whatever it is that you create. Create love out of your body. Do it. We need it.
And if you want to follow up on a couple of the people that Chantal just mentioned, episode 51, that's Jerry Visca, where he tells that whole story about becoming the why guy. Fascinating. And Doyle and I always laugh about this, number 44, where that episode with Michael Doyle of this podcast, pretty much everything that comes out of Doyle's mouth, Chantal, is quotable. That was back when I'd listen back and then I'd pull out quotes for social media. And I think I stopped doing that after Doyle's episode because my fingers fell off because everything was quotable from Doyle. But funny how those connections all come together, isn't it?
Yes. My heart is filled with gratitude, even for the people that I've not mentioned, but you know who you are. Thank you so much. My heart, I don't even want to touch into it because I'm going to tear out of love and gratitude, but yes, thank you.
Well, I'll let you sit with it then for a bit. Chantal, thank you so much for doing this and so sharing so beautifully. It's going to help a lot of people. We've had a number of people sitting with us through the whole conversation. We're grateful for you as well and hope that you've enjoyed what Chantal has shared. And hopefully we'll be able to see you like in person sooner than later. But in the meantime, absolutely. Keep being you. And thank you so much for this time today, Chantal.
Thank you. Love you all. Thank you for whoever's watching.
That is Chantal Watier, the founder and owner of Space to Grow Studio here in London, Ontario, Canada. But as she mentioned, geography need not be a deterrent for you getting in touch. I'll just put it up on the screen here again, that you can connect with Chantal at spacetogrowstudio.com, spacetogrowstudio.com. You'll find her social channel links up there as well. And I encourage you, wherever you are, to connect with Chantal on social media. She shares some really insightful things on Instagram and Facebook. Certainly we're connected there and I've seen those, and I would really encourage you to connect with her and follow along with what she's doing. This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man, episode 103. We'll put this into a blog post and make sure that all of the links for this episode are available there. You'll be able to find that at noscheduleman.com. You'll be able to revisit this episode and all the episodes in the archive on audio with iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or via video at YouTube or Facebook. On both of those places, you can find us at No Schedule Man. Just look for episode 103, the story of Space to Grow Studio with Chantal Watier. I want to say thank you to Diamond and Gold Treasures, Trickett Financial, Mo Mondays London, Provincial Glass and Mirror, Mulligan Realty Group, and to all the good people at theturtletribe.com who would really resonate with everything that Chantal shared today. I want to thank you for watching and listening. I want to wish you well. Please be kind to yourself. Please stay safe in the midst of this crazy time. We will see another side to it. And I look forward to being with you every step of the way. On behalf of Chantal Watier, my name is Kevin Bulmer. This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.